Design Education by Practice. Join our upcoming webinar on Workplace Evolution and Future. Join us now and RSVP your seat for free attendance to know what are the best practices on how we make places work. And how it actually works once occupied. On how places respond to us and how we engage with it. Knowledge Without Boundaries Initiative on Workplace Evolution and Future. Episode 1, The Community.
And we welcome you to our initiative, Knowledge Sharing Initiative, and our first series about workplace design, the evolution and future. Now, this series is going to be divided into a couple of episodes. This episode will be talking about the community. I would like to start by firstly bringing you the whole idea about code and what it's about. So eventually, Code is a fresh new startup built around knowledge sharing as the base ethos of it, and eventually ensuring that design professionals share back their knowledge to their colleagues across the industry. With a very important thing of cascading back experience across the whole industry. Built environment is the base that we're base arena that we work on, looking at how we could enhance the environment and the paradoxes within. Design education with the practice in the background is the mission, and it's very important for all of us to start sharing back whatever we've gained across the years to our colleagues back into the industry. The knowledge areas that we'll be covering is including building design, architecture, interiors and furniture and objects, community design, master planning, landscape, placemaking, operating communities, engineering solutions, structure solutions, technology and automation. As well as code is handling a research part, which includes design solutions, materials, construction methods, and assessment of technology and software. All at the background, sustainability and well-being is our base strategy that we're working upon. Workplace design. So eventually the evolution. So eventually we're looking at a 20 years or 15 past years that eventually things have been changing on. Complexes that have been developed, creating new CBDs and new centers of economy around our cities. It had evolved whether as a regeneration within our communities or even new centers opening outside the city centers. But eventually, no one can deny how these had been fundamental, that had grown, and we've seen them growing in the region. Episode 1 is talking about the community in specific. Episode 2 will be talking about buildings and spaces. Episode 3 will be talking about indoor air quality for better workplaces. Okay, about myself, I'm Ahmed. I'm a 20 years experience. I've been working in Dubai for the past 16 years. I've been working with Dubai Holding, with Dubai Development Authority, Dubai Holding in the form of head of design and development, and the Dubai Development Authority as the head of architecture. I founded Code by main purpose, as we've described earlier, bringing in our team. So we have Huda. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thank you, Ahmed. Hello, everybody. Huda Shaka, I'm Associate Director with ARUP, the Built Environment Consultancy, and the Urban Planning team. My background's in sustainability and urban planning.
Dara?
Yeah, thanks, Ahmed. My name's Dara Towhidi. I'm a partner with Foster & Partners. Been with Foster's more than 20 years now, which is hard to believe sometimes. and I've been heading up the Dubai office for about the last 5 years. I've done quite a few projects in Dubai over the years, one of which actually was alongside Ahmed.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to do that. Mark?
Thanks, Ahmed. Hi, my name is Mark Stobbs. I'm the Director of Programming and Outreach for Dubai Design District. I've been with the project pretty much from day one, since it was a construction site in 2014, to the present day, which is now a fully functioning and fledged creative community. So yes, primarily engaged in programming, events, marketing, and PR.
Yeah, Cass?
Hi, I'm Cass. I'm one of the directors at SQUINT Opera, a creative digital company specialized in the built environment. I've been working in the Middle East for the past 12 years. Numerous projects from Dubai to Saudi to new national museums of Oman. It's great to be part of this team. Thanks for the invitation, Ahmed, and hello, everyone.
Okay. Firstly, I'd really thank the team for their effort into getting this first webinar live. It's really appreciated, the time that they've given, and I couldn't have done it without you. I'm proud with the team's diversity. So from urban planning to architecture to community management, as well to visioning and experience. I think we will hopefully bring some good ideas to you, team. So from here, I would like to bring the first subject, where eventually we're looking at how does a location affect a development in terms of workplace and a community, and eventually does the location really affect it, and whether it's suburban or whether it's urban, or how does it grow? So I'll leave the floor to Huda. Please, Huda.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. I think as an urban planner, I approach projects from this point of view. So how does it fit in with a wider context, with a wider city, with the neighborhoods? How does that project stitch into all of that? And so one of the case studies I want to show today is a project in London. Some of you might be aware of it, Broadgate. So it's been around since the 1980s, and it's actually had a really interesting evolution. So this project started, as I said, in the mid-1980s, where at the time it was change in financial regulation meant that all of a sudden there was a huge market demand for big offices for big banks, and the area, British Land was the developer, and they wanted to develop this area again inward looking, because that's what the banks wanted. Also, it was on the corner of East London, which at the time wasn't a very popular place, it wasn't necessarily the safest place in London. So it was designed to be an inward looking office kind of campus for a specific type of office at the edge of the financial center. Actually, fast forward 20 or 30 years later, they've realized now that actually lots have changed. So one, the context has changed. The site is still the site, but the location around it has changed. So Shoreditch is up and coming place, lots happening there, Old Street. So you may know these areas. And what's happened is, one, we have fintech now, which we didn't have in the 80s. There's a lot more interest in what happens not just within an office but outside. What's the public realm? How does the lifestyle of the employees work with the office environment? And so British Land saw this opportunity of effectively reversing the development, so it becomes a lot more outward looking. It integrates better with the surroundings. It makes the most of the location it's in, with the vision of then in the future adding more retail to it, even connecting it even further, and managing the mix in it to provide additional diversity. So we developed a placemaking strategy for them. And if you look at Broadgate today, you know what used to be described as a place where there's lots of grey suits and then in a grey environment.
Sorry.
It's okay, no problem. What used to be described as a place for kind of grey suits in a grey environment is now the largest pedestrianised neighbourhood in London. And people think about it very differently. It's a place for lots of people from various backgrounds to not just work, but to enjoy their time, to meet people formally, informally. And that was kind of 4 principles really we employed. So one, connect Broadgate to the wider context, to the wider location, to the different districts. Help Broadgate engage with the community. So this is again what we're talking about today. So the developer becomes plays a leading role as a custodian, reaches out to the various authorities, but also to the other businesses, community groups in the area, and curating spaces, which we'll come to in maybe a bit later in the presentation. But in terms of connectivity, just to give you an example, there's I think the idea is to connect it from all the different sides. So if we take an example, right next to Broadgate is Liverpool Station. And that's originally there, as you can see on the left-hand side, there's only really 2 ways to get from the station to Broadgate, and you couldn't walk through the station. So the station was a barrier. Whereas now you can actually, there's multiple ways of getting to Broadgate, including through the station, and it becomes a lot more integrated. And this is one of the stations which will be the Crossrail or the Elizabeth line will go through. So they're expecting, you know, a lot more people to come through the station, which will eventually benefit Broadgate. And so if you look at this section, this is the section that goes through the station. It connects one end, workplace, you go through the station, which actually has a lot of retail and public spaces, and then on the left-hand side is where it connects to Broadgate. So it becomes one active corridor for the public. It's not a block or a barrier anymore. And then in terms of custodians, again, it's actually as a developer, they can do a lot, and they have working with partners around the city. They were able to organize things like pedestrianized routes, like bus stops at particular locations to better connect to the public transport, like specific events, which we'll come to in a bit later. So there's a lot more that you can get out of the asset. So from a commercial perspective, it's how do you make the asset really reach its full potential by thinking about the location and how it can integrate with it better. Sorry, I can't hear you, Ahmed.
Very interesting how it's within the city and then the location. So lots of cities are actually moving out from within the city to outside, and we're hearing of laws and regulations saying no, you cannot build any more within the city. You cannot. You have actually to go out only, and that's it. What would you think of that, Huda, in view of what you just described?
I'd say that's a huge missed opportunity. So there are economic benefits that come with the diversity and the density and opportunities that city centers provide, and the infrastructure is already there. And so, and I think now with what we're looking into in terms of efficiencies and sustainability strategies, how can we get the most out of the infrastructure that's already in the ground, and then also give people access to these spaces. If we're talking whether we're talking about reducing carbon footprint or people's well-being and helping them walk and cycle to where they work or between where they live and work, it's a lot easier to get those efficiencies and well-being and sustainability benefits when you're in the core of the city, when you have the proximity to the various uses.
Very interesting. So this actually brings us to the next part with Dara. Considering what Huda just shed a light upon, do you think that eventually building within the city can actually create a value to the surroundings? What's your thoughts about that, Dara?
Yeah, thanks, Ahmed and Huda. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of building plot boundary that as architects we're so used to dealing with. And we tend to, start with these red lines on our drawings, and we have a plot, and we have a set of requirements that's given to us, by the client and by the city, height limits, area limits, and also budgetary constraints. And we have a big challenge getting all that to stack up. And very often we can forget to think about how a project influences its environment. So we're very much attuned to thinking about how does a building integrate with its environment, but the other way around, what impact does it have? Which is it can be a part of the story that we don't often look at. So if we just sort of zoom back a little bit and just remind ourselves that even individual buildings form part of a bigger city, and just take that bird's eye view. And because we're on the subject of workplaces, I wanted to take the example of the F&P office in London, which obviously it's a workplace. And what's interesting about it is that when Norman and the partners in the business decided to move the office to this location, it was which by the way is in Battersea. It was really quite an out of town area, and it was almost an industrial part of the city. So it's quite a brave thing to do. So if we look at a plan of the area that's actually taken from just after the Second World War, that red outline is where our office is located. And although this is a really old photo, actually, in the early 90s when the office was put there, it wasn't all that different. I remember when I went for my job interview at Foster's quite a long time ago now, and I walked around the area. I walked past set of warehouses. I walked past an old bus station. I walked past a go-karting track, and it was quite a shock to see this sort of crystalline glass building in the middle of all this. Of course, the things have really changed now. And since we put our office in there, we started to get designers moving in. So, Vivienne Westwood came in first, who's a really famous British fashion designer who a lot of people will know. The Royal College of Art then opened a branch of their campus in that old bus station, and we started to get bars and restaurants coming in serving that. And then, of course, as the area started to get more life, it caught the attention of developers, and we started to get more residential developments. And then art galleries came in, and this whole kind of this whole set of developments sort of came off the back of that initial move. So it's very interesting to think. It's not just about the project that you do. It's not just about how the numbers stack up in the particular project, but the wider area can be really heavily influenced. And so this old industrial area really is transformed now into really a quite exciting creative district in London. So when we're doing large scale projects, I mean, it's very difficult.
I think Cass had a point that he wanted to add towards this what your office had done. So Cass, you wanna shed a light on your?
That's okay. You go ahead. I'll add it at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Shall I carry on? So yeah, I was going to say that it's difficult. It's difficult for us architects to have, that big view when we're doing a single site, and we often would rely on the city or the developer to make those connections. But when we're designing an urban scale project, a piece of infrastructure, or the kind of thing that Huda was talking about earlier, then there really is an opportunity to think outside the site boundary, if you like. So here's an example of a project we did recently in Jeddah for an integrated transportation system, which takes in metro stations, bus stops, water taxis. And part of the work we did was not only to design the station and the network, but actually to start thinking about what sort of development would come around those stations once you've added in that connectivity. So, of course, we look, how does the architecture exist and integrate with the urban environment? But perhaps more importantly is what does it facilitate? What does it allow to develop in the future? So we're starting to look here at F&B, retail, office developments that are all allowed by that piece of infrastructure that you've added to the city. So the message I wanted to get across, and it's not just architects but developers, is to try and take that view about the wider social and economic impacts of a project, and not just think within the limits and the constraints of the site.
So Dara, you're actually an advocate of the fact that building within the city probably can regenerate the value of even old districts and improve it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, even if we're developing a new project in a new piece of city like we do in Dubai or in Saudi, it's always really important to think about those wider impacts, which really takes the support of the client and the wider city to do that.
What do you think?
Sorry,
please go ahead.
I completely agree with what Huda was saying, and also agree to a certain degree what Dara was saying. I think using the existing city fabric, I think that's beneficial. Using the existing infrastructure, that's beneficial. But they are part of an existing fabric that there's been part of that area. For example, where Dara is referring to Battersea, our offices used to be right behind Dara's offices, or Foss's building, opposite, or actually next to Vivian Westwood. It was the old biscuit factory. But unfortunately, because of the sort of popularity of that area, that old derelict building, which was grade listed 2 building, beautiful brick, it's been demolished and turned into flats. So there is that organic growth, which is amazing and beneficial. But sometimes there is a role that communities or planners can play in safeguarding and keeping some of the buildings that might not meet with some of the more trendier fabric. So that's the point I would wanted to make.
Very interesting. So you had a neighbor that you didn't know about, Dara, probably.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. That's good to know. When did you leave, Cass?
Okay.
We left 2 years ago, but we had a bar called Doodle Bar. I think the bar was probably more popular than our office.
Yeah, well, I know. Yeah, we all know Doodle Bar well. Didn't know it was run by you guys though. Yeah.
Okay, just in terms of the Middle East context and in terms of such spaces actually, and how. So probably in London, we might know that the weather is very interesting of creating a grouping together that eventually comes together. People like-minded, people probably members of the same society. Maybe there's a value chain over there that comes all together. But what about in the Middle East? What do you think, Dara, in terms of the weather conditions that we have and culture that we have? What would you bring over here, especially that you probably come from UK and you've started building over here a couple of projects. What can you reflect on that?
Yeah, sure. So what I wanted to say first about that is whether we're designing a workplace interior or we're designing urban spaces for workplaces, or really kind of any piece of intervention in the city, it's really, really important to go and talk to the people that are going to use it. So coming back to the workplace, if we're going to design a workplace for a company, one of the first things we'll do is go and talk to the employees, go and talk to the managers, but also talk to the really junior staff, the people on reception or the people in the post room, understand how they use their space and what their aspirations are for the future, what's motivating them, and what's motivating the company. And that same process applies to a piece of urban design. So here's just an example of a project that we've been working on in China, where we were asked to insert an urban park into a very busy street. And the first thing we did was send a team from our Hong Kong office to go and meet with the residents of the local area and kind of find out what was it that was going to really get them interested in this new park. And before we actually started designing, that's what we wanted to go and investigate. And so if we're talking about climate, then there are very similar lessons to be learned. You don't go necessarily and talk to the people, but you go and look and listen to the architecture of a place. So when we started working in Abu Dhabi, for example, this is going back about 15 years, we were approached to design a zero carbon or a highly sustainable city called Masdar, which I guess quite a lot of people will know about. And during the very early research, we looked at examples of urban design in the region. And one of the really well-known ones is the walled cities of Yemen. So this one's called Shibam. And what the designers, the architects, or the people, I mean, maybe they weren't architects in those days, but what the people understood is that if you bring the buildings close to each other, if you achieve a certain density and a certain proportion of streets, so the width to the height, then the buildings actually start to shade each other, and you can create urban spaces that are naturally comfortable. And when we started to look into that a little bit more, and particularly when we compared some sort of more, let's say, North American style urban planning, we actually found that if you get the urban planning wrong, you can make the situation worse. So if you compare some parts of downtown Abu Dhabi to the open desert, the temperatures are actually hotter in the city. And the reason for that is that the city absorbs the heat of the sun. If you're not careful in the way that you plan things, the tarmac heats up and then it re-radiates that heat. And it makes us all feel a lot more uncomfortable. But if you can apply some basic, simple rules, and these are rules that people have refined over thousands of years. If you can do things like creating shaded arcades, if you can introduce greenery carefully, if you can introduce water carefully, then you can make a really big impact on the environment without actually having to use any energy. So it's highly kind of efficient and sustainable as well. And you can see the influence on our design for Masdar City, where we tried to achieve a really well-defined city edge. So we concentrated the construction in a certain area of the site, and we left other bits of the site for support functions. We didn't try to spread everything out, and we tried to achieve a certain density within the city. Connectivity, you can see the metro line there snaking its way through the city. So really bringing in some of those vernacular, if you like, the vernacular ideas into a more kind of contemporary setting. And it's important to say we're not trying to copy what's old, but we're trying to understand what drove it and reinterpret it in a modern context, bring new techniques, new technologies to play, but without losing that knowledge. So if you look at the urban spaces in Masdar, we were able to get rid of the car. So all the cars either park at the edge of the city or they move underneath the city. And that meant the city is just given back to people. You can really narrow the streets down and achieve that same kind of planning that they did in Shibam. And that the environment's naturally much more comfortable. So when we come to public squares, it's not just about the kind of physical architecture, it's also about the programming. So making sure the edges are activated, creating activities within the square. Just here we've got some dancing fountains which keep the kids active. Making sure that the squares are well connected. And this is really kind of Mark's area, but making sure the spaces are programmed so you've got lots of events happening. And then you've got that interplay between the residents of a place and the people who pass through. And that's really important. So you're keeping a space really active all the time. And so I just want to talk before I finish about the idea of measurement. So one of the things we really like to do is when we make promises to our clients about how projects are going to work, we like to go back after and say, have we actually fulfilled that promise? So when we talked about these urban design and passive design strategies in Masdar, how well did they really work? And so we sent a team over there to do some thermal measurements of Masdar and compare it to downtown Abu Dhabi. And what we found really just reconfirmed those ideas and those kind of passive design strategies that we talked about earlier. And we were achieving really significant gains in comfort, just purely from kind of, sensible planning. So up to sort of 15 degrees of felt temperature reductions.
Very interesting. Huda, do you have any engineering part or background that you guys would like to bring in this regards as ARUP?
Sure. Actually, kind of going back to your question about climate and culture, we recently did a thought piece about rethinking cities in arid environments, because we seem to export a lot of planning and design principles from places that actually are not similar in climate. And actually arid cities, of course there's the Gulf cities, but then there are arid cities around the world and they can all learn from each other. So I'd encourage people to look at that if they're interested in that topic. But yeah, I fully agree with what Dara was talking about. And in terms of measurement and designing things was kind of with an engineering eye to them. Microclimate in the Gulf, as in many other places, can make a huge difference to outdoor thermal comfort. So when we look at microclimate and comfort, we're not just looking at temperatures, but we're looking at overall comfort. So the radiation from different surfaces, what people are wearing, the convection currents, the wind, the humidity, all of that matters when you look at comfort. And the image on the right shows us going out and taking measurements, and it shows the temperature actually is different from different materials. But then we develop models for areas and calibrate the model against the temperatures that we measure. And then it's a series of interventions that we can think about to help create a comfortable outdoor environment. So the best thing you can do as a designer, as a planner, is to think about passive measures. Those are the measures that if you're designing for the climate, if you're thinking cleverly about the design, you can get those right from day one, and they're not going to cost you anything. Actually, they save you money. So these are things like shading. That's the number one thing to get right in this part of the world, is shading. The materials you use, and the Masdar example is fantastic at showing the impact of that. Air movement and air currents. And then you can think about passive elements as tier number 2 is maybe adding water features or planting. Bearing in mind that when it's hot and humid, actually the water features aren't going to add that much more comfort because it's already quite humid. So you have to really be thoughtful about what is the challenge you're trying to solve at what part of the year and what areas. And then there are the secondary measures that involve things like spill air. So a space that's just outside an air-conditioned space can benefit from the air when the door opens and closes, for example. There is spill air that comes out of that. And then finally, when you really, really need it, and none of these will get you to the temperature that you want, then you can think about active measures, mechanical cooling, etc. Those are the much more energy intensive and costly interventions, so we really try to target them. And if you get this hierarchy right, then you can save those only for the very small parts of the development, and you can get a lot of parts working without them. So the final thing is, if you're thinking about a master plan overall, not a single building or a single space, you can then start to think of a journey of a user through them, and that you might use, you might give people access to the ground floor of buildings, so that they can come, that's part of their journey, and they go through them, they cool down, and they go back to the outdoor space. And that's kind of the beauty of thinking about a part of a city as opposed to a single plot, and you can plan those journeys across multiple buildings and multiple sites. And so as an example, this is a project we were part of in Dubai, and it's a mixed-use project, including office. And there was a very clear goal of making the project work for pedestrians, but also, working with the transport infrastructure, the metros, the trams, etc., around the area. So the location was central in defining it, but it was also about having quality public run. That was the differentiator from day one. And so what you'll see is over the next few slides is a network of pedestrian streets using various different microclimate controlled measures. So these are the streets in green that you see now are designed from a passive design perspective, so no active measures. And then we have added to that the network that is tempered, so with maybe the cool air coming through them from the side buildings. And then finally the actively cooled spaces. So when you kind of put these three together, then you get a full connected network. You don't have to fully air condition everything. It's just part of that network that's air conditioned, but it works with the rest of the network to get you where you need to.
So interestingly, the tempered one, the previous slide, Huda.
Yes.
So obviously, we always, whenever any one of us who's passing beside the building and the AC is on and he's in the hot weather, he really loves that moment where eventually the door opens, gives you some breathe. So generally, is there a way that you can design this to be designed, or
Absolutely, and it really starts. So I mean, it's not to get this right. You have to start from the very beginning. And we were fortunate. This was part of the existing city, but in a lot of ways, it was a blank slate. So we have to think about the street widths, the uses of the buildings. How can we activate the ground plane? It doesn't really work as a last minute add-on. You have to think about it from the very beginning so that everything works together.
Very interesting. This brings us actually to our community partner. So eventually D3, my beloved space, and eventually having been involved here, I would like, if possible, Mark, if you could shed a light to us, and eventually I think you had a piece of a video that maybe you would like to bring up or something. So,
sure.
So if you can tell us how is D3 actually implementing and getting benefit out of these principles that were just
well, I think
discussed.
we've taken from a master plan level. Actually, should I play the video and I can talk over the top of it?
Yeah, but please, okay, everyone, please just because the video might have a bit of a voice control. So if you find that the voice is going loud, please just put it down. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So is that now playing? Oh. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I think what the video highlights specifically is this use of putting buildings closer together to create kind of tighter pedestrianized alleyways within a city like Dubai. And as Huda and Dara have kind of pointed out, it's helped us develop our programming to be more year-round programming. We've created a more a cooler kind of climate during the summer, and even today, it was probably 44 degrees outside, but there were people sitting outside Starbucks having a coffee, for example. So we've managed to create this space using the existing architecture, but by creating kind of these alleyways and a pedestrianized sort of center for D3, it's kind of become integral to our programming calendar, which has allowed us, during the cooler months, obviously fully use the space, but even during the summer, we can use outside spaces in the core area, which is where the sort of central piece of D3 is for certain programming elements. Now, within the core as well, we've got access to some interior atrium spaces. So you do get a lot of kind of crossover between the exterior spaces and the atrium spaces, which allows us to kind of have a flow of people coming in and out. So we've kind of adopted kind of those kind of methodologies, let's say. And I think we've also benefited from kind of creating a kind of wind tunneling effect, because it seems to draw the wind through the design quarter. So much so that when we're doing events with installations, we have to take into account the wind effect on whether the installation is going to stay up. So I think we've created that just by the master planning that was done. Ahmed, I think when you were here, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this brings the part back to the design table and thinking of people during the design stage. And I think Cass was having a part that probably he's bringing to this. How do we actually imagine our communities, Cass, beforehand and at the time that when we're designing? So
sure. Let me share this sort of one image which I've just loaded up. I'm not sure if it's going to work. This is sharing. Can you guys see?
not yet.
Maybe I'll share my screen. Can I share my screen? Is it possible? I'll quickly share my screen. It shouldn't take too long. It's this image by Benesco, which sort of shows basically how architects were showcasing their projects or their ideas to the Pope. This is Michelangelo showing how basically the Sistine Chapel and the surrounding area will be designed. And it's safe to say that not a lot has changed. You know, architects and designers still sort of do things in a similar way. You know, you have a board and you sort of present your ideas and hopefully they buy into your idea. But technology has evolved, and you know, it's amazing that we're having this webinar, you know, having this conversation during a pandemic. I mean, it's incredible. But why can't we do that with design? Why can't we communicate good ideas to decision makers, whether it's to city planners or to you know, government entities, or whether it's to a developer or an end client? So our role is essentially being sort of that kind of the glue that binds it together. We make complex ideas sort of look simple or look believable, and get people to sort of buy into them. I'm going to quickly sort of share with you one project which is sort of very close to my heart. It's a project in New York where after the Hurricane Katrina, there was a lot of damage left behind. So the idea was, how can you sort of protect Manhattan from sort of future floods or future events such as Hurricane Sandy? Bjarke Ingels and a few other architects who pitched their ideas to the government and also to the people in the town hall. But this particular film really resonated with them, and it almost became the winning project, which secured him something like $500 million, and it's on the first stage of construction. So I'll share with you guys just quickly. I have to load it onto.
It's okay. I'll load it on for you.
Have you got it? Okay.
That was actually why Sandy was so bad.
Give us 14-foot tides.
Because of the phase of the moon, it was already
the most shocking part of Hurricane Sandy,
as well
was the
as
fact
the storm surge coming in with the wind and the tide lining up perfectly.
It exceeded expectations.
I think the sheer magnitude of it caught a lot of people off guard.
When Hurricane Sandy came, we were not prepared at all. I mean, not even the slightest.
Yeah, it was like an alien invasion.
I think the sheer magnitude of it,
and not the good kind of water.
So yeah, I mean, it came right in front where there was literally boats on 14th Street floating in front of our.
Yeah, it was like an alien invasion of
we had a sub-basement level.
And not the good kind of water.
So yeah, I mean, it came right in front. And it was totally covered in water for 2 days. We lost everything. Everything.
We had a sub-basement.
We're really concerned about another storm and the flooding that's possible, and we think that the next time it's going to come even further inland.
I'd like to see some type of flood protection
really
in this
concerned
area.
about another storm and the flooding that's possible, and we think that the next time it's going to come even further inland.
Something that just brings more walks of life. You know, another escape from just the business and the hustle and bustle.
Something that just brings like more different walks of life.
another escape from the busyness and hustle and bustle.
There's this great space that could really become community space.
Putting in front of our.
I think that the next time it's going to come even further in.
I'd like to see some type of flood protection in this area.
Cass, can you mute your voice, please?
There's this great space that could really become community space, cultural space, and active uses.
Everyone enjoys space, and in New York and other congested cities, it's hard to come by.
Anything that makes the cities greener is just such a wonderful thing for not only the environment, but the people that live in the city too, to be able to be around that space.
The plans, the berming, the sense of how it can become into the natural landscape itself, how we want to program that is really the next challenge. We are the link, we're the tip in the sense of the big U. It's important that the entire waterfront of Lower Manhattan build in the plans that have been put forward, because we can not only fortify this great city of New York, but be a model for cities all over the world.
This is amazing, Cass. Cass, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you guys could see it or hear it properly, but it wasn't synced together, and I shared the link on the chat for everyone else. The reason I was trying to sort of show this, it was a kind of bottoms-up approach from the designer. You know, going and actually speaking to the local people in New York. You know, what are the actual needs, and then coming up with a design that reflects their needs, and then communicating that to decision makers. So you know, that's essentially our role. You know, what Huda and Dara were saying, and what Mark was saying about some of these spaces before they get built. You know, how do you communicate them? You know, you can't just use a traditional means to do that. There are so many different technology out there. You know, for the first time, you can actually wear, you know, a VR headset and actually see what the space looks like. You know, how big these corridors are and how wide these alleyways are.
What's very interesting, Cass, what's very, very interesting is actually the fact that you've dealt, how you've spoken to the people, I think is the great deal of it. It's about actually getting people's feedback as architects and designers.
Absolutely, and you know, there is that idea of you know, people think they know more, but actually the people on the ground who live it on a day-to-day basis, they think otherwise. So it's just having an informed decision and then implementing it. But it was.
I think the point is that we are affecting people's lives by whatever we build, and that's an obvious thing.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, a doctor might actually have an influence on one person's life, but as an architect, you know, you're literally hundreds and thousands of people. So, you know, these are some of the legacies that stays, hopefully, at least minimum 100 years. How you design it, how you communicate it becomes the key.
Yeah. Okay, so this takes us to the next part that associates to spaces and how we program it. And please, like all our colleagues who are listening to us, if you remember a place that you actually loved going to or that affected you, or a place that you believe was impressive of how you would not forget the experience, please write to us and let us know what you think, and let us know these areas. It's important for us because we take it as part of our continuous research and eventually continuous education by practice to bring them in the next sessions. So this brings us to Huda and actually the programming of spaces and how does it work. So Huda, could you take us through this, please?
Yes, sure. This is going back to the Broadgate example in London. And if you remember the 4 pillars of the strategy, curate was the 4th one. So once you get the location and the connectivity rights and the partnerships with the other stakeholders, the particular spaces, then it comes down to events and programming. And again, I mean, if you think about this, Broadgate as an office campus, you would think, why would anybody go there after 6 p.m.? But the idea is that it's introducing retail uses, opening the space up to people to just walk through or going from one area to another, and thinking about the people who work in these offices and what they do after work and in between work and before work. So the story then becomes about how can you animate the spaces and program them, as Mark was talking about. So just an example, you'll see the x-axis on this is kind of January to December. And so the idea was, how can you develop programming? Obviously the restaurants and the cafes are there pretty much all year round. But what events can you add that work with the climate, that work with the festivities or the public holidays or what else is going on in the neighboring locations? So the red, green and yellow lines are the neighboring areas, and they each have their own events and their attractions and destinations in their own right. And so the idea is that Broadgate can work with the other areas, develop a calendar of events across the year, temporary and particular times of the year, more permanent in others, that then you can almost kind of have a day out in Broadgate that differs across the year and kind of fits in what else is happening. And I think this is very relevant to the Gulf, to cities in the Gulf, because and then hopefully we can, we're all spending summer in Dubai, or most of us are spending summer in Dubai this year. And I, as somebody who grew up in Dubai and spent pretty much every summer in Dubai, a lot of times I wish there'd be more people here. But I think, I didn't quite wish for a pandemic. But hopefully what this summer teaches us is that we can actually enjoy the outdoors in the Gulf in the summer. I'm not suggesting we have lunch kind of the middle of the day in the middle of July. What I'm suggesting is we design spaces so people have access to, can have a walk next to the beach or in a park during the mornings or the evenings, or make the spaces actually livable throughout the year with the right design, with the right programming. And I think what's worth remembering is it is really about the individual experience. So what information are you giving people that they can personalize, that kind of goes to what they want to know? Are the spaces and the places and the events, is the place safe for people? Is it accessible? Is it legible? As somebody with a trolley or the pram or with a wheelchair, or somebody who doesn't necessarily read the particular language, can they make their way through the space? What is the experience they're getting? Can they find the amenity, the particular shop or the cuisine or whatever it is, the experience that they're looking for? Does the place target multiple audiences?
Very interesting. So I think this actually is again a case live in D3. I hope I'm not being biased, but but eventually probably we have a case that Mark can bring over here. So I'm not promoting D3 or anything, guys. Yes, I'm a startup in D3, but eventually it's not a promotion or anything. So Mark, would you like to take us through the video?
Sure. Well, let me start just by saying a few things actually about what Huda's just been saying. So this idea of curation is very much kind of the heart of what we try to do. We also find ourselves in a bit of a chicken and egg situation, as much as we have retail on the ground floor, obviously, But then the retail relies on us as programmers, as event organizers, to do the organizing of events to bring the footfall into D3 to support their businesses. Now, the challenge we have at D3 is the geographical element of D3, and also the kind of the fabric of and the nature of the city of D3, or of Dubai, I should say, where people drive everywhere. You don't have a natural walking footfall. So we have to really attract and pull in people to come to D3 to see it both as a destination. And we positioned ourselves as a destination of design. So obviously we're a design district. And at times we've also experimented with becoming more of a consumer district because, we've tried to cater for all audiences. But the challenge is always, and I think it's the case across Dubai, is how do you attract a footfall to your district, to your area, when they have to drive. So you have to take into account all the other factors, such as access to the site, free parking, valet. Can they get to the shop they want to go to directly? All of these extraneous factors that I think in a city which is more condensed like London, you don't really necessarily have to take into account. But you have to look at the wider picture of the fabric of Dubai to then understand how you fit into it as a district. So we, as D3, stick to our sort of mantra that we're a destination for design, but at the end of the day, we're also a business district. So we have to support our retailers. So we have to think of programming ideas and events that are going to bring footfall to the district all year round, and that's our biggest challenge. Luckily, and this will lead me onto the film. Luckily, we've been able to work with many amazing partners, and the Dubai Design Week has become the pillar event for us as a district. And I think we're now in our 6th year of hosting it this year. Admittedly, this year will be on a slightly more edited format, taking into account the recent pandemic. But I think what will perversely come across is actually more focus on local and regional designers, because we won't be able to fly in as many international. So there's going to be a stronger focus on regional designers, local designers, but also our own business partners. And we've just done 2 briefings to really encourage those business partners to be part of this year's event, more so than previous years, because we need them to help us make it a success. So that's effectively it.
So I think actually this is one very important note is, and I think this answers the questions raised earlier by David about do we actually believe that COVID-19 will be, and this is a question that we cannot ignore in view of the current conditions that we're in. Will be seeing it affecting the future of developments? Will working from home replace working from office and get smaller? I think the video that D3 is bringing, and how D3 is dealing with workplace, and not only D3. There is back in London. There is, and even some of the examples that our colleagues have started posting, like Portofino, Italy, or downtown Amman, or even there is a regeneration that happens, and how we activate these places. Internet City by Omar. So eventually, I think bringing the video to everyone would probably make a value. Please, again, the voice of cloud, you can bring it down.
So yes, I mean, really, Design Week is, like I said, it's the figurehead of all our programming year. And it does encompass lots of different factors. So it encompasses the design industry focus from a B2B angle, but also kind of activities for families and kids at the weekend. So we try to cover everything off in one week.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think obviously activations of so places are about people. Places are about people. It's not about the place itself. It's about the people. It's humans who create the experience, and it's humans who create the life in the place. And very obviously, we've seen lots of places very well designed, very well manicured, and even I love the word manicured. Foster's team used to use a lot. So places that eventually are maybe built on the most expensive part, but maybe when you find them dead in the evening, you find them that eventually there is no life in them. So it's about humans creating this experience.
Mm-hmm.
So this brings us probably to the end we were trying to do within 1 hour. Dara has a part that is very interesting based on a case study that they carried out. Dara, would you like to bring this up to conclude?
Yeah,
Dara?
sorry, I was on mute there. Apologies. So I was going to talk about the sort of emotional impact of spaces, just leading on from what you said, Ahmed, about architecture and spaces being all about people and how we react to them and how we feel about them. And there's a particular project in London that we did in the early 2000s to rejuvenate Trafalgar Square, and that's really become even more of a symbol for London now than it ever was. It's a really successful public space. It's a place where people gather to attend concerts or to look at the artwork that's on show there. And it's even a place where they come and protest if there's something they don't like. But of course, Trafalgar Square wasn't always like this. And if you go back a little bit, around 20 years, to the image on the left, it was really a traffic island. It was incredibly noisy. It was smelly. You really couldn't get to Nelson's Column in the middle, and there was no connectivity. You can imagine the noise and the disturbance of what it was like to be around Trafalgar Square at that time. Whereas the image on the right is the way it is now, and the big change we made was simply just to connect the square to the National Portrait Gallery across the road, and just to allow people to move through that space, to allow people to reclaim it. And of course, the square is no longer a place for pigeons; it's now a place for people, and it really is used by the city. And I think it's fair to say it's loved by a lot of Londoners. So coming back to this idea of measurement, and we talked earlier about measuring temperature and about measuring dimensions, we thought it would be really interesting to explore, could we measure how people react emotionally to spaces? Could we somehow quantify it? And what's enabled us to look at this is the fact that we're no longer just an architecture practice. And because we're asking these kind of big questions, over the years, we've been joined by scientists, economists, urban planners, and all sorts of other disciplines which are in the mix there with our architects. And one of these scientists, is Carlos here in the photo. He took up this challenge to see, could we map human emotions? Could we kind of try and understand them a little bit better and how we react to space? And he developed a device and an app which tracks 6 emotional indicators. And he took this device for a little walk as his first experiment around Battersea, where our office is based. You can see on the right-hand side is where our office location is, and you've got Battersea Park around there. He's pretty calm, maybe a bit bored at the office, I don't know. But as he starts to walk across the river, he's obviously getting traffic noise and he's getting people. The level of excitement this device is measuring is gradually going up and up. So as you get these higher peaks and these more red colors, he's more kind of stimulated in his brain by what's happening around him. And if you can start to actually correlate, if you take photographs and you take sound recordings and play it along with this analysis, you can start to correlate how different events and different spaces actually make us react. And this thing, you wouldn't necessarily, or he wouldn't necessarily be conscious of this. So it's actually measuring something that goes beyond just his kind of his experience. And so it's very early days. It's very, very experimental, but we're trying to bring this into our projects now. And the idea that we can try to quantify reactions, people's reactions to different spaces, and then maybe just be a little bit more targeted about how we design. So if we want a space that's going to be naturally calming, we can learn about what those qualities are. If we want a space that's going to get you more kind of excited, we can maybe have a database of what those qualities are. So there's some really interesting opportunities for the future there.
I think again how we affect people. We've received a couple of very interesting suggestions of places that affected people, and probably have left them with thoughts about it. So we had the Shivaji Mumbai International Airport by SOM, David, and we had Muhammad mentioning sustainable city and how it is an experience to live in, having not lived in a villa before, and moving into living in a community forces you to integrate in the community as part of your everyday routine. And everybody has the concept of complete lifestyle, but they actually achieve it uniquely in a different way. Yusuf mentioned the block at D3, again, probably because Yusuf had a relation with D3 as well. But eventually the block at D3 as well is a very interesting park that brings new concepts with the skate park within, with the climbing zone. I can say that this is one of the parks that eventually, when children come to it, they repeatedly say that they want to come back again and want to go to the block. We had the Portofino from Italy, downtown Amman, Jordan, King's Cross redevelopment. Interestingly, Joe, this was actually a case study that Huda was thinking of bringing earlier to the table, and I've seen the slides. It's a very interesting place. We've also had the La Grande Place, Brussels, and haven't been there. Would probably look forward. Downtown Cairo, Egypt. I've been there. You need to watch from the traffic. So the ferry, Port Said, Egypt. That's a very interesting place. It's so authentic. And then Amr saying, how can you know if they are positive, negative emotions? I think this is to you, Dara. He's asking about how can you know if they are positive or negative emotion, these neural activities.
Yeah, so the device measures, for example, it measures stress levels. So you could say, well, that on the whole is a negative if people are getting overly stressed by an environment. On the other hand, it measures excitement, how stimulated you are by something. So you could say, well, that's a positive, but if there's too much, it depends on context. If you want the space that's calming, and it's providing too much stimulation, then that's not a good thing. So it depends what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think generally the technology is growing to a great extent, and sensing feelings or actually. So we know human feelings from eyes, and we know human feelings from face impressions. That's something that is very common. So if you take a look at the child eye, seeing the dog coming running at him, you'd probably know very well that he's scared. Very obviously, the technology is growing and is improving, and I think the use of technology is obvious. Cass had presented how technology over existing built environment is growing. We couldn't have had these visualization or animations earlier. I think this brings us to the end of our first webinar. Really appreciated who stayed with us till the end. Looking forward to have you on board. Really appreciating the team, Dara, Huda, Mark, and Cass. Really appreciated your support. Appreciating D3's support. Appreciating Cairo Designathon, who supported us into putting this to the media. Amazing Architecture, who supported to put this into the media. And please spread the news. We're going on another session, hopefully, on 20th of August about spaces and buildings. We're having, again, a group of team members, maybe different moderators joining on board. Really appreciating your time, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ahmed.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.